everyone. Well, welcome to our new LinkedIn Live series, ADHD in the Workplace. I created this space recognizing that living with ADHD can present challenges in the world of work. And I hope that through this series, we can generate ideas to support adults with ADHD to utilize their strengths in their career. So I'm your host, Samantha Hugh, a communications consultant and founder of ADHD Girls, a media and communication education platform born out of a desire to empower a girl and a woman with ADHD. All right, so for our first LinkedIn Live series today, I'm joined by Stephanie Camilleri, the Director of ADHD Advocate and the ADHD Unlock. So Stephanie has been coaching individuals with ADHD in the workplace and in life in the last 3 years. And the ADHD Unlock also runs weekly webinars, a program of support for individuals with ADHD. And she is also my ADHD coach. And because of her, a lot of my ideas have actually come to fruition. And so let us welcome Stephanie. So the topic we will be covering today is how can we harness the strengths of adults with ADHD in the workplace? And as Steph, thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely that I can talk to you with everyone on LinkedIn.
For inviting me.
I wanted to ask you, and the first question is around the challenges that someone with ADHD might face. So, as you know, ADHD is an invisible condition, and we know that many adults with ADHD fly under the radar for many decades. Those of us who climbed up the career ladder develop coping strategies, to overcome some of these challenges, but the difficulties still present itself, especially when life, becomes a bit difficult to manage. So, how do ADHD symptoms cause challenges in the workplace for someone with ADHD?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and they seem to kind of layer and compound the different kind of traits in terms of the challenges that present. But the main issue, I'd say, firstly, before we go into kind of the ADHD traits, is that lack of ADHD awareness that still very much prevails in the workplace as well as in healthcare even. And the difficulty is the DSM-5, which is what psychiatrists use to diagnose ADHD. It doesn't kind of take into account the emotional dysregulation aspect of ADHD. And from what I've seen coaching adults with ADHD in the workplace, I'd say that it's that emotional dysregulation and the rejection-sensitive dysphoria, which we can talk about because that shows up a lot in the workplace, that really ends up being the most crippling aspect of ADHD. So, already there's a lot of myths around ADHD. As we know, the naughty boy, right? You think of ADHD, you think about kind of naughty child or boy in the classroom. And that's why it's great, Sam, that you found the ADHD girls, because as we know, so many girls and women just don't get diagnosed because they don't fit that mold. And the DSM-5, all the research historically around ADHD has been done on boys and not adults even. So that is growing, thankfully, more and more. So more and more, I've seen, more and more adults are getting diagnosed and looking for support, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, I certainly can relate to a lot of it, the rejection sensitivity dysphoria and maybe some anxiety as well, around managing expectations, of people you work with and maybe from your employers. Because, if you have living with undiagnosed ADHD all your life, you would have not really understood why your brain worked that way and why your reaction is that. Why do I feel this way towards, being told that my work isn't slightly up to standard or, so it's a strange feeling, but then actually knowing what it is and having a name to it, actually helps you find a way to circumnavigate that, don't you think?
Completely. And I guess it's difficult because, we're not just labels and we don't want to just be the label, but without the label of ADHD, we're not going to get the support. Right. I mean, ADHD medication, not everyone obviously likes to take it, but it's actually really, really effective. Personally, for me, I found I was on autopilot before I was medicated, before I found out I had ADHD. I was one of those people that had these great coping strategies I was truly interested in doing well, competing and, doing well at school, and kind of just found myself going, getting into university. Then I just did the course that my marks got me into, which was law. got into law, and then, you know, they kind of funnel you, right? You know, some are clerkship, and then a graduate, and then, you know, paralegal, and then it's all stepped out for you. And so when you've got ADHD, you don't know it, and you're not treated, and you're one of the more maybe high performing ADHDers, you just kind of just go along. You're not really directing your life. You're very much on autopilot. So I found myself in banking law, which when I was medicated, I realized, amongst other things and other reasons, but you know, I didn't want to be there. It wasn't what I actually wanted. And a lot of ADHDers that come to me for coaching, it's the same issue. You know, recently diagnosed, they're not stopped to think about what they want. They don't know who they are.
Yeah, you're right. Like, you know, in your past career, you were in a very fast-paced and kind of high-stress environment, you know, which incidentally actually is a place where ADHD will thrive in, because, you know, the adrenaline and, you know, the dopamine that you get from hitting goals, you know, like it's so when people say that, you know, there are some struggles with ADHD, it's certainly not to do the work, is to stay interested, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. It's really difficult, and can be, as you said, really confusing for ADHDers that don't understand their ADHD, because if you don't understand it, if you don't have that right lens to look through at yourself and what you're doing, then you can't understand, you can't ask for the support that you need, you can't communicate the challenges to your manager, to your secretary, if you've got one of those as well, because they can get very frustrated with ADHDers that tend to kind of go all over the place and not give clear instructions and get distracted. And it can be really difficult for the people working with us when they don't understand our ADHD as well. So it really does come down to the understanding and the education. It's so important. Without those, ADHDers do struggle, and many, I mean, unfortunately, I do coach quite a few that come to me after they've had to be signed off work. So many, Sam.
That's so sad, Steph. I mean, I completely understand. You know, ever since I've been in this space, I've also heard of people who, once they know they have ADHD and they actually communicate it to work, their reception of that news hasn't been that good. So this brings me on to the next question, which is the scenarios of stigma and misunderstanding in the workplace. And because of these challenges that they face, what scenarios do you often see, you know, someone with ADHD encounter in the workplace, especially around, you know, like how their symptoms are being perceived and the misunderstanding, and, you know, from the employers?
Yeah, unfortunately, with ADHD comes difficulties with admin, for instance. So the things that are really simple for other people are actually really difficult for us, but we've still got this mindset that it's simple, you know? And so a lot of, like in coaching, I hear a lot of, I just have to do this, and it's like, no, hang on, right? We're looking at admin, you're looking at forms. Now, ADHD, the fuel for the ADHD brain is authentic interest. We need to be authentically interested. It's something to do with the reticular activation system, kind of doesn't activate without it. And admin doesn't do it for us, for a lot of us as well, kind of IT issues, having to deal with printers, expenses, claim forms, timesheets in the law, for instance. These are the kind of things that we struggle with. And despite how hard we work and how well we do in really difficult areas, like things that, a lot of our neurotypical peers would struggle with, come very easily to us. And unfortunately, that stuff seems to just get, I don't know, waylaid or ignored, because it's the challenges, the kind of the obvious challenges that we have in relation to the admin, or being late on things, or being late into the office, right? Even though we're working crazy hours and not switching off. It's all that stuff though, right? That's not seen. And so we're just kind of seen as unreliable. And it can be really frustrating, and you get to the point, a lot of the ADHDs in the workplace get to the point at hopelessness, you know, and that's when the hopelessness sets in, that's when they're in trouble. And unfortunately, a lot of the managers, because they don't understand what's going on, a lot of my clients get beaten over the head with their ADHD challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising, really, considering that most ADHDers are really intelligent and perform really well in their work, and they are judged on the things that, you know, people like who come to work on time, and if you speak too fast, then it's an issue for some people. And yeah, I mean, sometimes also the anxiety can cause problems in raising your hand in a team meeting. Even though you have all these ideas brewing in your head, you think like, should I say it? Should I not? And by the time you come up with a solution, then it's past. So
Yeah,
I find myself in this place.
yeah, completely. And I found that it was crazy actually. Once I got medicated, I basically got promoted, because what you were saying there, Sam, because of our weak working memory, our difficulties with communication, finding the right words at the right time. The case with ADHD is we know a lot, as you said, and a lot of my clients are at the top of their industries, are absolutely brilliant and talented people. But, in other areas or in aspects of their job, they're falling short. And it's usually not the high value stuff either. This is not the high value stuff for the organization. We're talking mostly the administrative stuff that can be handled by admin support. But what they find, though, they're just not able to get the support that they need so that it can free them up to do what it is that they do best. And again, that's really frustrating for them. They start feeling hopeless because, I mean, what can you do? So even when they do know what they need, what I found in coaching, I can coach people around, exactly what it is they need, the structures, the strategies. But if the manager's not on board, and if the awareness is not there, it kind of is futile, I've noticed. So awareness training is crucial. It's really, really important. And the manager really understanding the challenges and having those kind of supports in place, the kind of the gap fillers, the executive function fillers in place is so important.
Yeah, I noticed that many organizations are, adding neurodiversity on their agenda and the inclusion. And a lot of organizations have a diversity and inclusion team, to provide accommodation for someone with ADHD. And I've seen this, in schools, in universities, colleges, where they have their own team, but not necessarily working to effectiveness. But I know that organizations are trying, and I think mainly it's the bigger Fortune 500, like FTSE companies that are actually paying attention, maybe because of the reputation as well, and yeah. So what challenges do we need help with, and should seek accommodation for? Say, if a company has a diversity and inclusion team, what can someone with ADHD go to them to ask for accommodation?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. But again, because a lot of the diversity and inclusion, sorry, that's my Alexa, which we use. A lot of ADHD need reminders to stay on track. Yeah. Assistive technology. So yeah, that is one accommodation that's really helpful, apart from when it interrupts you when you're doing these things. Assistive technology like Alexa, just looking at that now, an Apple Watch. So ADHDers struggle with, time passing. And so I've got some clients that literally there's apps that ping every hour just to get that sense of time going. And so they use their Apple Watch. I personally as well, my reminders, if I set reminders on my phone, if it's just a ping, we tend to just ignore those after a while because there are so many reminders that, we just we ignore them. But if you're doing it by your watch, it vibrates and you will look down and you'll look at what it's saying. So this is what we do in coaching. In coaching, I mean, no two ADHDers are the same. What will work for Sam might not work for me. And that's why it's really important to really kind of take the time to speak to your ADHD or your employee with ADHD and find out what it is that works for them. Because just kind of like an organization just buying in a whole lot of assistive technology and then applying it, just blankly like to everyone is not going to work. That's not going to work at all because everyone is different and there are different types of ADHD. And obviously we've got different strengths and different ways of doing things. So it's got to be tailored. It's got to be tailored to the person.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, so it's like with actually ADHDers of all ages, you need to tailor it to the strength and what they do exceptionally well. In fact, doing this is, really productive because it lights up the dopamine center in your brain, being recognized for what you're good at and, not being made to like be good at something that you might find challenging. So a tailored strength-based approach, is really effective. And it is the question of whether organizations have that resource, to interview each person with ADHD, when they come to seek for help, what exactly do you need?
That's
apart
true.
from, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why access to work. Not a lot of people know about access to work, and it's a great a funding kind of program delivered by Department for Work and Pensions, and access to work in conjunction with an employer. So the employer contributes as well to the cost of accommodations, but it can cover things like ADHD coaching. It also can cover the cost of a personal assistant. They don't make it easy, unfortunately, for you. And again, remembering that one of our main challenges is admin, and the access to work application process is not that accessible for many of us. I mean, I've actually spent introductory calls sometimes with people, helping them fill out the form. We might start a form and get distracted, and then the worst thing, what happens, guys? Yeah, actually, big tip: if you are filling out your access to work application, don't do it straight onto the portal that they provide, the government portal. Actually write it down in Word, because what happens, it times out. I can't tell you how many clients, because you can imagine for an ADHDer, finally, choosing the right answers, or because a lot of ADHDers are perfectionists as well and really doubt, the quality of kind of what they're providing, but then also have trouble interpreting questions. So do they mean this? Do they mean that? Which is another reason why ADHDers don't complete forms. But yeah, so you can imagine if they've gone to all this trouble of finally getting it all, mostly done, and then they're just about to press send, form timed out. I mean, what's the likelihood that they're going to try again? Yeah. And actually, what happens is that it just again confirms and that story that why do I even try anymore? Because, and you know what I mean? Because all of the difficulties and challenges, I try, but I fail. And that's the narrative that we need to turn around. And yeah, so the opposite of rejection sensitive dysphoria is recognition responsive euphoria. And that was Dr. Ed Hallowell came up with the antidote, the RSD, which Dodson came up with. But it's about really trying to, ADHDers thrive on recognition. They thrive on the strengths-based approach. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations do not understand this, and they do not implement this quite simple and free technique.
Yeah, Steph, I agree. It's one of the easiest government grant to get, when you have a disability. It's an invisible disability. And I've talked to a lot of people about this. ADHD is only classified as a disability because the society doesn't have a model that supports, our challenges. And access to work is incredible. And I know many ADHDers who had persist, throughout the process and then, get the accommodation. But it is not disability friendly. It's not ADHD friendly, because even when you get the accommodation, you still have to sort a lot of things out. And even the reimbursement part of the system, you have to do it by post instead of email, which our modern day like technology can facilitate really quickly. But it is worth it, and for me, I am getting the help I need now in terms of getting even a support worker, a virtual assistant, to help me, even though there are some challenges with delegating, but I'm still working through that. And ADHD coaching has been life-changing, just working with you, Stephanie, in the last few months had, made a lot of changes, positive changes in my life that, I really feel so empowered about, so it's amazing to have this access to work, pay for it as well, it's great.
Yeah, no, we are very lucky. We're very lucky in this country, and I'm really pleased that the coaching, I love how you use the word, you've said that, it's empowered you, because that's exactly that. I would say that's kind of the biggest outcome that, the ADHD coaching wants to provide, is that, that instilling back that hope and empowerment. Because ADHDers have got massive potential, a lot of them, like ridiculous amounts of potential. But again, because of historic experiences, being put down, only being criticized, the RSD then kicking in, the narrative, it's a very negative one. There's a lot of negative self-talk, and so it's really hard to access, that power within. So definitely in coaching, we help you create that space and call out any limiting beliefs, but then also try and get you to create that vision, how you want to kind of work, or maybe even the workplace. Maybe you realize, probably shouldn't be saying this, but sometimes the workplace is not going to be for you. And actually that's why there are so many ADHDers that are entrepreneurs that go out and have their own businesses. Not saying that that is the solution, because as we know, Sam, when you have your own business with ADHD, you might not have a manager, but it comes with a whole other set of issues in terms of, that lack of accountability and oversight and processes. You've got to create your own. And that's, again, processes, procedures. It's like what one of my clients talked about. It's like, that kind of treacle, and the bureaucratic treacle, getting stuck in bureaucratic treacle. Yeah, we want to be able to put ourselves in situations and design our environment so that we can just harness the strengths and not get stuck in the challenge areas, which we often tend to do in the workplace because we don't have that control. We can't control where we put ourselves.
Yeah, you're right. Steph, quite a few ADHDers I know, found themselves in many different jobs, in the span of as many different years. And myself, has been a term I came across recently, a multi-potentialite. So a multi-hyphenate, where, even though you specialize in something for a long time, you then go on to do various different things, when you realize that life is quite short. I have quite a few things I want to do and quite a few things I like to do. So I go and do them, and because of that, I also do struggle, from the slight depression of not knowing why I was this way. Why could I not persist, down a certain career like many people do, but because of this, I've actually turned it into a strength now. I created a program called Communicating Your Value, where it helps people with ADHD find their own career roadmap, and it has been very empowering, to come to this stage. Thank you so much for your insight about this, Steph. I want to move on to the very important question of harnessing ADHD strength. We know that ADHDers have so many wonderful strengths, and when they find something they're truly passionate about, it can really drive innovation and change the world that we live in. And what are the strengths of someone with ADHD that can be harnessed to contribute positively and dynamically to an organization's growth?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many strengths. Again, though, they do tend to get buried under the negative narrative. So it is really important, firstly, for the ADHD to spend some time to really work out and identify what are those strengths, particularly in terms of the workplace context. What are those things that you do that bring high value but are actually really enjoyable as well? And usually the high value, kind of high enjoyment task is going to be something that is going to come effortlessly to you as an ADHDer. It's going to be when you're in flow, when you're in hyperfocus. So this is another issue and myth around ADHD. I mean, even the term ADHD, attention deficit, that's not the issue. We've got a surplus of attention. There's too much attention, and the difficulty is focusing that attention, containing it and directing it in the right direction. But it's certainly not a deficit. And when we're doing something we're authentically interested in, when you've got your skills at the fore and you're in a supportive environment and you feel recognized and you feel like, you've got meaning and what you're doing adds value and you're contributing, that's when all the strengths shine through. So, and the common ones for ADHD is this creativity, that ability to think outside the box, optimization. A lot of my ADHDers, they are massive problem solvers, and it's optimize. Sometimes too much, so we do need to kind of rein it in. We need to boundary it. We're not very good at boundaries. That's another thing we work on in coaching. But yeah, there's too much. So we're talking about kind of containing it, but allowing. So the container, though, is not there to restrict us, because a lot of ADHDers are rebels and actually tell us what to do. And we tend to just not because we want to be defiant, but there's something to do with the wiring, right? Is that we push back. It's got to be our idea. So ADHDs thrive when they're given agency, when they're given ownership, when they're given trust and respect, not doubts and criticism, and really trying to be kind of funneled into, timelines that don't kind of fit the ADHD brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're not very good at kind of reporting and updating, and that's where a lot of managers have really struggled, because they worry that the task or whatever won't get done. And then, but the ADHD usually, unfortunately, waits quite to the last minute, because urgency is what they need for their brain to kind of to fire up and get the thing done. But I mean, when we're on fire, and that's why a lot of ADHDs, you see them in ER. I've got doctors that work in ER that thrive on the night shift, lawyers and barristers, right? CEOs, well, there's always a crisis. And that's when they're in flow. That's when they feel calm and confident. And, that's kind of when they're at their best, is usually in these crisis situations. So, yeah, there are, a lot of the ADHDs are found right at the top and managing crisis.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible, really. I mean, I've come to the conclusion that we are driven by emotion. A lot of the things we do, has to mean something to us. It has to have some sort of social justice, some sort of social mission. I mean, if it's just solely for the profit of an organization, it doesn't work. It has to be that, and as well as like something that is going to make a change and make a difference. And being in an emergency room has got all that elements, as well as the adrenaline, that floods your brain and calms you down in a moment of crisis.
That's it. Yeah, and there's also immediate results. The other thing that we need as well, if the reward or the result from what we do, if it's too far away, if we can't see the context, that doesn't do your employee with ADHD any favors. They need context. A lot of employees with ADHD struggle when there's ambiguity, when things aren't clear, when instructions aren't specific enough, when they don't know exactly what their role is, what their responsibilities are. Obviously no two ADHDs are the same, but that ambiguity can often cause this procrastination. A lot of ADHDs bandy this word procrastination around, and actually there's always a very good reason why an ADHD hasn't started something, always, because I coach them around specific things. And this procrastination label doesn't do us any favors either, because there's always a reason.
Well, that's right. It needs to be immediate for you to see what would happen if you finish this. What would happen if you do this. Right?
Yeah, or maybe the ADHD doesn't have everything that that they need to complete it, and ADHDs really struggle to start something that might not be able to complete, or if it's out of their control. Lots of, and also, as you said, we are emotion driven. And what I find, a lot of ADHDs just kind of get stuck emotionally. There's a lot of triggers sometimes where they ruminate, and that they really get stuck and can't kind of move forward. And so the difficulty with the workplace support is when Access to Work talk about just confining it to workplace issues, what they're not, taking into account that, you need a holistic approach, because what's going to be happening for the ADHD are in their friendships, their family, personally, they're bringing it to work. And what impacts them in those areas is certainly going to impact them in the workplace.
You're right.
Taking a holistic approach, really important.
Well, that's right. That's why that, apart from medication, you also need, a whole bunch of strategies to help you, because there's this famous saying that pills don't make skills. And, so having coaching, really helps, and looking after your nutrition and sleep, and a whole bunch of things, for your emotions as well. So to stay balanced, which is a constant effort, as you can imagine.
Balance. Yeah, balance. That's, I mean, again, it's not your neurotypical version, and it's also not going to be the same between, from one ADHD to the other. It's about striking your own balance, but that is very difficult for us. Again, our wiring, we are kind of all in or all out, black or white. Gray is difficult. Yeah, it's that's
I wonder why that is, that it's all or nothing for us.
Yeah, I know. Extremes. Yeah, I'm not 100% up on that. Not even like neuroscience is not my my strength, definitely. And actually, see, that's another thing. It's about it's really important to be able to understand your weaknesses as well as your strengths, and accept them. Stop fighting them. A lot of ADHDers in the workplace, they spend all their time trying to make up for their weaknesses or trying to get better at their weaknesses. But then, what you say yes to, you're saying no to something else, and they're saying no to all the things, all the value that they would add to the organization. And very quickly and easily, if they got support to cover them for those things and just, were able to concentrate on their areas of strength. So it is really important. Now, ADHDs, because of RSD, are reluctant to own their weaknesses and to say, this isn't something I'm very good at. I think it'd be better if someone else does it, because they're always trying to prove, no, I can do it. No, I'm not deficient. I can't have any chinks in my armor. So unfortunately, ADHDs don't do themselves any favors in that sense. So there's got to be work done on both sides. The ADHD, certainly the managers, the employers, but just make sure that whatever information, whatever support that's being given, that it is actually ADHD informed and that the providers are certified. Because there are a lot of neurodiverse trainers that they don't really know ADHD very well. And that's, it's really important, because although ADHD obviously sits under the neurodiverse umbrella, it comes with co-occurring conditions, it still is quite different. And there are a lot of nuances. And if you don't understand those, you could, it's not going to be very helpful in terms of helping. Yeah,
that's right. And that's why I think it's so important to have someone who actually has ADHD work with you, because you can't be a neurotypical or not have ADHD and then trying to imagine how the life is like for them, right?
I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. No, you couldn't engineer that. It's not possible, right? It's not.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Steph. We can go on about this, can't we?
Yeah.
We can talk for days about this, but I know that you have an appointment to go to. Then thank you so much for your time this morning. It's so illuminating to hear you say all the things, and also validating, which is very important for an ADHDer to hear that, okay, that is me, and there's nothing really wrong with me. It's biological. I can get the help that I need. I need someone to understand. So once someone understands you, then you accept a little bit more about how you are as well.
Yeah, completely. So just to recap before we go, in terms of, there's like the 5 kind of elements: ADHD awareness training, the ADHD coaching and education, and ADHD advocate. We've got coaches that provide the ADHD coaching, and ADHD Unlocked is really helpful education wise, the webinars and the community. Also workplace aids, so assistive technology. Certain like Dragon Dictation is really good for ADHDs that struggle with writing, for instance. Personal assistant, and kind of looking at the job, looking at your strengths, weaknesses, working out how you can redesign that job so that you're kind of just harnessing your strengths, not getting stuck in those weaknesses, and access to work. Yeah, warning. Remember, put it in Word first.
Exactly. No, this is all very good strategies, and definitely something we all need, as a reminder as well, to navigate our workplace and our career. So thank you, Steph. Really grateful for you coming on today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Sam.
Hi, thank you, everyone. So if anyone is listening right now, and if you're a passionate change maker and ADHDer with a story to tell about your experience in the workplace, or if you want to work on furthering the mission of championing inclusive strategies for adults with ADHD in the workplace, please get in touch with me, and you might very well be my next guest. Thank you so much, everyone.